Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Coonrod. I'm the project manager or a project manager in District 1. And I would like to welcome you to the Caltrans virtual open house for the Jack Peters Creek Bridge Widening and Rail Upgrade Project. Tonight's agenda will begin with a brief PowerPoint presentation on the project, followed by a question and answer session. And I'd like Manny Machado from our Public Information Office to first go over a few housekeeping items. Manny?
All right, thank you, Karen. Hello, my name is Manny Machado, and I'm the Public Information Officer for Lake and Mendocino Counties. Before I turn the meeting back over to Karen, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items for this evening's open house. Attendees are in listen-only mode during the video presentation. A Q&A session will follow the presentation. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand so the host and co-host are notified. Your question or comment will be heard in the order of hand raised. Now, the Title VI statement, as we'll read the slide, as you can see on your screen.
Oh, I have the wrong slide.
Right there, not a problem.
Okay.
Caltrans ensures that no person in the state of California is excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or otherwise subjected to discrimination in Caltrans programs, policies, procedures, activities, and services on the grounds of race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability. We now begin tonight's open house presentation on the Jack Peters Creek Bridge open house project. Karen, we'll send it back over to you.
Thank you, Manny. So for our agenda, Jamie Mattioli, our Mendocino Coast Corridor Manager, will discuss the public engagement activities that we've been coordinating. Then I will briefly discuss the project scope of work and provide an update on the project development. We will use the remaining time for questions and answers. And now for Jamie.
Thanks, Karen. So we're just continuing the public engagement that we've committed to on this project. We've met roughly quarterly. I believe this is our third meeting of the sort, and we want to continue meeting as the community sees fit. As we get to construction, the engagement might look a little different. It might be, even more informal as we go, working with the area construction engineer and the team, the resident engineer, and phone calls and that sort of thing. So we aim to keep engaged, and that might evolve. This is a photo of us. Karen and I were lucky enough to go to the home of Walter and Gail Boyle there, and some neighbors met, and it was just really nice to be able to have this meeting with the people who were really close to the project physically and interested, and we're so happy to do this sort of thing, and just a great opportunity for us. So thanks again to everybody who was there. And that's all I have, Karen. We just want to be brief and to the point and make time for questions this evening. That's what this is about. All right, thanks, Karen.
Yep, thank you, Jamie. So yeah, so if you have been following this project, this presentation will look familiar. It's been edited for brevity, but I wanted to at least cover the purpose of the project and scope of work for any new folks that are participating tonight. So the Jack Peters Creek Bridge is located just north of the town of Mendocino between Lansing Street and Road 500D. So as you can see in this photo, the existing shoulders are approximately 1 foot wide. Pedestrians and cyclists must share the lane with vehicles. The railing is too low for pedestrians and cyclists, and the existing bridge rail does not meet our current crash testing standards. So Caltrans' highest priority is safety, and Caltrans aims to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries for all road users, including those who walk, bike, drive, ride transit, or travel by other modes. This project proposes to make safety improvements to State Route 1, which is part of the designated Pacific Coast Bike Route and the California Coastal Trail. And proposed safety improvements include widening the bridge for a 6 foot separated pedestrian walkway along the west side of the bridge, adding 6 foot shoulders to provide a designated space for cyclists, and a recoverable area for vehicles. So see-through barrier rails that meet current safety standards would be installed. And this image shows the existing bridge rail adjacent to the lane, the traffic lane. And this next photo shows the same view with the concrete bridge rail 6 feet from the traffic lane and the separated pedestrian walkway on the west side of the bridge. And this image shows the existing elevation or side view of the Jack Peters Creek Bridge. And the proposed widening is designed to match the existing elevation. So we expect it to look the same from the bottom. And since our last public meeting, we have obtained the coastal development permit. The project has been through multiple internal reviews, and we are preparing the contract documents for advertisement. We expect to advertise the project in June, and the contract should be awarded to a contractor in September of 2023. We expect construction to start in the spring of 2024 and continue through the fall of 2025. And once the contractor is on board, we will have more specific information regarding construction start days, the number of working days, and lane closures, and just more details. So that concludes our presentation for tonight. We'll first respond to any comments. I don't think we received any comments or questions emailed. Manny, have you checked that?
Yeah, we do
go over those
have
first, and then-
a few emails. So one of the emails concerns for cyclists and pedestrians for this project.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry, but
I'm looking at two different things. I'm a little thrown off. Just before I'm going to close the presentation because I really want to see everybody and I have to look sideways. But I just wanted to point out that if you have any more comments or questions after this presentation, to make sure that you email them to us at Jack Peters Creek Bridge at our email account for this project, and it's at dot.ca.gov. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and then we'll open up the floor to everyone. You're all good with that? Yeah, there we go. So so I see Manny. Can we share it so everybody? Is that just my personal screen?
I believe.
Here's the bridge. Now I see everybody.
I think we're all looking at each other now.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll just start the other question. So go ahead. Can you repeat your question, Manny?
Yeah, there was a resident concerned with the project for cyclists and pedestrians. Would there be enough space for them across the bridge?
Yeah, so the bridge will have 6-foot shoulders on both sides of the highway on the northbound and southbound. And then we will also have a separated 6-foot wide pedestrian walkway on the west side of the bridge.
All right, thank you for that. Again, raise your hand and we will get to you. Our first question is from Norpur Dahl. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you all. These relate to the project schedule with respect to the coastal permit. And there are several parts. I can take them individually or just run down the list, and then people can respond to them if you would please. The first one is, you have actually been issued the coastal development permit by the Coastal Commission? The second question is, the coastal permit had a number of conditions precedent to issuance. Have all of those been satisfied? And if not, what is the schedule for satisfying those that have not been? Thirdly, the project requires a grading permit from the County of Mendocino. Has that been obtained? Fourthly, the project involves transport of excavated material to several sites in the town of Mendocino. Have the required property owner agreements been obtained? And how long is that material expected to be located on those properties. For instance, the post office lot, there's one property adjacent to Highway 1 by the Hill House Inn, and there may be others. And then finally, has the pre-project monitoring that has been required by the coastal permit been performed in any of the various steps? Thank you.
Thank you, Norbert. Karen, do you want to just take those one by one and see if you or team members can get to those? I think there's 5 points there.
Yeah, I was going to defer to Liza. I'm so glad Liza's here. I'm not sure if the coastal permit has actually been issued. I'm trying to think, did I sign it? I've signed a couple other permits. So it was, what I should say is it has been approved. The hearing, it went through the coastal hearing. And so that has happened. We do have more submittals to make to the Coastal Commission. Some of them, I don't think we'll submit them until the contractor is on board. We have to submit our final plans. I know that for sure. We don't have our final contract plans available yet. I'm sure we have to submit our final revegetation plan. Liza, are you prepared to speak on that? And before I hand it over to Liza, I'll just throw out the other thing I heard was the soil. So we did not acquire, at one point we did look at having temporary construction easements for staging and to stockpile materials, and we did not acquire those parcels. We are not expecting to stockpile any soil on site. We expect the contractor to haul it off and to find their own disposal site. So that's not, the two parcels that were previously considered are no longer involved with the project. And then I have to defer back to Liza with the monitoring. So
The last one,
Yeah.
Karen.
go ahead.
Liza.
What was the other one? There was a lot.
Grading permit. Is there a need for a grading permit?
So I will talk. So we have the State Coastal Commission. I don't think we have a grading permit. I think the State Coastal Commission permit covered it, but Liza, I don't think we have a separate permit. I think we just got the one.
Correct. And then related to question number 1, we only had one prior to issuance condition for the CDP, special condition 13, and we have met that, and we do have the CDP.
Okay. And the last one, I think, was the project monitoring. Was there anything we could say about that one? Norbert, do you have a quick follow-up? I do want to get to other,
Yeah, I was
other
going to say
questions
maybe
here.
I do have a quick follow-up. Thank you.
Okay.
And that is, now that the project proposes to have the contractor haul the excavated material off-site, not to the previously identified locations in the town, where are those sites located? And specifically, are they located in the coastal zone? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Norbert. Good question. Do we have any information on that?
Well, the contractor is responsible. It becomes the material of the contractor, and it has to be disposed of within a permitted site or whatever. They can't just haul it off anywhere. We have to. Jeff, I'm going to defer this one to our construction team, but there are conditions. They would either go to a site that's permitted, a commercial site, or.
So to try to answer the question better, we don't know exactly where the contractor intends to take it at this point. We don't even have a contractor on board. The project has not even gone to bid. But what the typical process is when we have the contractor find their disposal site, they're required to find a permitted disposal site or use a commercial source, which is permitted to receive those materials. And so we won't know until we have a contractor on board and what they propose as part of their bid for the work. And so it's a little too premature to answer that question fully. Hopefully that satisfies your answer there.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's keep going here. Make sure that we have time for everyone's questions. Anyone else out there on the call have any questions for the project team?
We do have a couple questions in the chat. Do you
Perfect.
know yet where the staging area will be?
Yeah, so the staging areas right now are planned on site within the state right of way. They will be mostly behind the K rail or we'll have temporary barrier rail in place, and it'll be behind that next to our access road for constructing the project.
And then we also have another question from my house on Paulette Drive. Will I have to look at bright lights at night and machinery on the postal property?
So when the contractor is working, we have to have, if they're working at night, lights will be, they have to use light. That's a Cal OSHA requirement. And at night, we also will have a temporary signal system in place. So there will be lights associated with this temporary signal.
Okay, and we do have a hand raised. Anne Marie, good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Ken?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I guess I can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have basically 3 questions. The one is thanking you for making this Zoom session easier to handle, but also request for in-person meetings. We've had 3 years of Zoom meetings. It's time to have community meetings where people can actually show up, and you show up as well. So I'm really encouraging you that if Caltrans is going to do anything along this Highway 1 corridor in Mendocino County, I'm very concerned about that corridor area, that it's an in-person meeting, because this is not only the only project that you have and are going to start working on really soon. Pudding Creek Bridge already has started the work, and also Caltrans wants to do a drainage project south of Salmon Creek Bridge and a safety project right next door. Basically, they're overlapping, but they're considered, as far as you guys are concerned, as 2 projects, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, that will be happening probably really soon. In addition, Manny, you just had an interview with Frank Hartzell, a local writer and editor. And apparently you're gung-ho about dealing with the Albion River Bridge and the Salmon Creek Bridge. With Salmon Creek Bridge, you realize there's also an issue about the lead abatement and DTSC, Department of Toxic Substances Control. So you have a lot of projects that you want to all attack. And none of these projects talk about the cumulative effect of any other project. And there's going to be a huge cumulative effect. We've all suffered tremendously with COVID, and financially and personally, individually. And for this particular project, you do not want to make it possible that locals could use 408, 409. You realize there's lots of potholes, there's no signs, but it might be faster to do that detour than having to wait until somebody, decides to let the traffic through when you're working on there and have both lanes blocked. So I'm encouraging you again to make it possible that this can be a detour and that people will know. I know you're making room for, emergency vehicles to go through, but that might take 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And so I feel that, what Caltrans is trying to do is crazy with all these projects all happening more or less very close to each other. And as far as the railing is concerned, I just would rather you would have a 45-mile-an-hour sign and not need all these heavy-duty fortifications and widening of our local bridges and roads. And because pretty soon we'll have a freeway here where, you know, with all the widening that's happening up and down the coast, and, you know, as soon as you widen the roads, then you have to widen the bridges, and it's an endless enterprise where you're really changing the character, and it's not necessarily safer, because the straighter and wider it is, the more people race, and you can't enforce that, and then you have more accidents, more heavy accidents. So I'm really concerned with the approach Caltrans has all up and down this coast. It's not really, I don't really have a lot of questions, but I feel we're sharing the same information with you, and we're feeling, you know, I feel we're not really being heard. And so the only question would be to revisit the detour idea, because yeah, so if
Thank
you
you,
could
Anne Marie. It's been over 5
about any
minutes
of
now
these
with
issues. Yes.
your comments. Appreciate that. Jane or someone else, could you please speak to the question about the detour, please?
Well, I was just gonna say that we don't direct highway traffic onto local roads. So we would not implement a detour. We would not prevent others from using alternate routes, but we would not be, you know, detouring traffic to your local roads.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
So I see Norbert's hand is up again, but we'd like to get to other people on the call. Anyone else out there have any questions, concerns about Jack Peters Bridge? So I see your hand up there, Catherine. If you're off mute, please go ahead.
Am I on mute? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Well, I also have some objections to this particular project. I did send a letter back in October 4th precisely, indicating a number of objections. Structural integrity is one thing. I completely support structural integrity. I've walked across Jack Peters Creek Bridge many, many, many times. The railing is actually perfectly fine. Walked across it for years. It's not an area that has ever had much foot traffic or bicycle traffic, ever. This is strictly a local area. I know that there is a thought of combining the Mendocino headlands and the quote-unquote trail, trying to link with Russian Gulch headlands. I think the whole idea is ridiculous. No one goes to the Russian Gulch headlands because they're relatively small. If you do, you drive there. Russian Gulch headlands are largely accessed by people who live in that immediate area. Most tourists who come to the area for the headlands experience are perfectly satisfied with the Mendocino headlands, which are quite extensive as far as encouraging bicycle traffic on the state. The entirety of Route 1 is shocking to me. It's completely inappropriate. The entire length of 1 is inappropriate for cyclists. And as someone who's lived here for 40 years, in my experience, the cyclists are almost universally reviled on the coast for good and sufficient reason. For most people, cycle in this area as a recreational activity. It's very limited. It's very minimal. The weather is iffy. 6 months out of the year. There are a lot of other projects and infrastructure repair and maintenance that is desperately needed in the area, both on Highway 1 and on the feeder roads, really seriously necessary, where the time, effort, and money could be better used than on Jack Peters Creek Bridge, which at the 50-mile-an-hour speed, I would say it takes 3 to 4 seconds to cross that bridge. And as far as linking it with the Russian Gulch headlands, I don't see a plan to widen Russian Gulch Bridge to a similar width. And you would need to cross that bridge as well to access the Russian Gulch headlands. There are bridges falling apart on one. The Hare Creek Bridge, every time I go across that, which is almost every day, I'm expecting a huge chunk of concrete to fall off. It's that degrading. Jack Peters Creek Bridge seems very stable to me. I'm not certain what's going on underneath the bridge, but this seems excessive. I see no reason to make it this wide simply to accommodate cyclists who are rarely, if ever, there, and people who want to take a photograph off the bridge. I think it's absurd. So I do not approve of that for that reason. Structural integrity, yes, but facilitating people who I use the term who want to do a little cycling or take some photos and cross off something on an elitist bucket list, I find rather obnoxious, frankly, particularly when so much real work is needed. In some cases, I think almost desperately. So that's my comment. It essentially reiterates the comments that I put in my email, which should be on file. But thank you. Did I go over the minutes?
Thank you very much. I didn't hear a question in there.
There isn't. It's a comment,
Okay.
although there is one question regarding, is there a proposal to widen Russian Gulch Bridge as well? Because that would be needed to this. If you're going to do one in order to reach the goal of the small Russian Gulch headlands, most of Russian Gulch State Park, as you know, is utilized as camping down in the gulch itself and the small beach at the mouth of the creek. And in order to reach that, you would have to do a similar widening of Russian Gulch Bridge, which is frankly a beautiful bridge in excellent condition to my knowledge.
So these projects were initiated to improve the barrier rail, all of the barriers rails are old. They don't meet our traffic safety standards. And so Jack Peters Creek Bridge does have it is structurally has the integrity so that we can do the widening. It's an easy bridge to widen. And so we took advantage of that. So this one is the other bridges we're looking at them. Yeah, so we feel it is needed because we want to improve the safety for all users. We want to make it safe for all cyclists. It is the Pacific Coast Bike Route.
You've done a study as to, have you literally counted the numeric amount of foot traffic and bicycle traffic? Sorry, I almost gag on the word. Across Jack Peters Creek on the various months of the year. Have you actually made an inventory of that traffic? There's a question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have done pedestrian or bike counts on the Jack Peters, but again, we do want to improve the safety for all users. I mean, that's Caltrans' mission.
You should do so. You should actually count this supposed traffic. I would recommend that.
Thank you, Catherine, for your questions and your comments. About Russian Gulch Bridge, there was at a time an effort to initiate a project, and we'd have to investigate where that stands in the list of projects in
Well,
the
if one of the
pipeline.
reasons, excuse me, if one of the reasons that you are proposing this level of widening and quote unquote improvement of Jack Peters Creek Bridge in order to link and this is what I was told, in order to link the Mendocino headlands with the Russian Gulch headlands, in order to do that, you would need to widen both bridges.
Okay, Catherine, I see your point.
Between them.
The reason to widen is not to create a linkage. We're there fixing the rail.
That was one of the reasons. I was specifically, in fact, right in the letter that I received, that was given as a principal and primary, well, I'm not saying primary, but a principal reason for this widening proposal.
Okay,
Specifically.
that is a benefit, but that's not the purpose of the project. I do appreciate your comments and questions. Really appreciate you being here. Is there any other questions or concerns from the community here about Jack Peters Bridge, the project?
We did have a question
Okay.
in the chat. They just wanted to confirm, will there be bright lights on the postal property staging area during the middle of the night?
So again, the postal property is not being used. Karen, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's correct. So I will just say, we don't have any intentions to use the postal site or the other site. I think it was Mendocino County might have owned the other parcel. Neither of those parcels are in the project. We do not have rights to them. However, I will say the contractor, which is not on board yet, may identify other sites and may get clearing to use other sites that are outside the state right of way. So we will know more once the contractor is on board.
Thank you, Manny. Any other questions in the chat or coming through?
As of right now, no.
Got a different project, but it's one that is mentioned in the group. Oops, sorry.
Catherine, you have a question about a different project?
The Hare Creek Bridge project. Any news about when that one is going to begin? Hare Creek?
The Hare Creek project has been unparred. It's been unprogrammed.
Why?
Based on revelations about the costs involved and the best economic decision moving forward. So there are efforts to initiate a maintenance project to address. So you mentioned the condition of the rail. So
that is the bridge of this entire area. That is the bridge that needs a complete replacement. That is the one with the heaviest traffic and literally appears to be disintegrating. Actually, it's in wretched condition, and it seems to degrade by the day. And that is the one that most people would be very anxious to have replaced.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, we are working on the rail, and in the future, we do expect to get a project in the pipeline. It's not in the pipeline as we speak. Any other questions out there about Jack Peters? Gail, do I see your hand raised? Do you have a question? Yeah, I can't hear you right now, Gail.
Okay. My question was, oh yeah, when are they going to start the tree trimming? Is that starting this fall then to prepare for next year, or?
Great question. We covered that, Karen.
Sure, yeah. So we expect the contractor to be on board in September, and we would expect them to start the clearing sometime in fall or winter before the nesting season starts, which is typically around February 1st.
Thank you.
Before then, and then construction would go into winter suspension, and then construction would start sometime in the spring.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gail. So anyone who hasn't had a question, any other questions out there?
Trees are you speaking of specifically?
Karen, do you want to cover that one? So we're talking about veg removal. What are we
Sorry,
talking about?
I missed the question, Catherine. Could you repeat that?
I believe she said which trees.
Which trees specifically? East,
So,
west, north, south of the bridge, which?
yeah, so the vegetation clearing will happen on the east side of the highway,
North or south of the bridge?
both north and south. So all of the bridge widening is happening on the east side. And so the central line of the roadway will be shifted east. And so we will, I think, I would have to look at the plans, but I think I'm not sure, it's about 1,000 feet. I'm gonna say it's 1,000 to 1,500 feet north and south of the bridge is how much the extent of the work.
There are houses on the east side. You do know that.
Correct. Yes. All of the work will happen within the state right of way. We do not need to acquire any additional state right of way to do the work.
I don't think you could acquire some of those properties. Yeah. And the protections for Jack Peters Creek itself, it is, as I understand, a blue water creek. Potentially salmon spawning. I believe it is classified as blue water.
Yes. So I'm going to defer to construction or environmental, but I don't think the contractor will be in the creek at all. I don't think we even have a creek diversion included in this project. So all of the work will happen from the abutment slopes underneath.
Any comments on that, Jeff or Liza?
So my recollection of the current anticipated scope of work is that there will not be any in-water work. We will be working on the slopes adjacent to the creek, and we will be widening to the east of the highway. And so to accommodate those new widened footprint, we will have new cuts that will be generating the earthwork that was discussed earlier. And those trees that are on the existing slopes will need to be removed to accommodate that widening. And there may be other incidental clearing that is necessary to support the new walkways and other things like that, but it's mostly grassy vegetation. So this was all detailed in all of the documents that have been presented, and it's been approved by the resource agencies, as I understand it.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to ask a question?
See two hands up, Anne-Marie and they have hands up.
Oh, I see. Okay, Carice, you haven't had a chance to make any statements tonight. Would you like to?
I was just wondering, you know, in the past, I've talked about several times and at the Coastal Commission about trying to improve the pedestrian access from the bridge all the way to the light, because the shoulders get so narrow. And if we're really wanting pedestrian safety, then for pedestrians that are walking across the bridge to try to make it to town, have y'all had any more thoughts or talked any more about trying to improve that all the way to the light where it narrows down to like 2 feet?
Yes, Carice, thank you. We have had good talks and observations. And Karen, do you want to share anything about that?
Yeah, so we cannot extend our project footprint further south to incorporate that work, but we are aware of it now. And so we are looking at other projects and trying to get that widening incorporated into our future projects.
I would
Are we
appreciate
doing,
that.
yeah, thank you, Carice. And what are we doing within the footprint? Maybe that's, I don't know if it would be different than what Carice would have seen or anyone else would have seen since the plans came out.
So the within the project footprint, we'll have the 6-foot shoulders on the bridge plus the 6-foot pedestrian walkway on the west side. And as soon as we get off the bridge, we will start tapering the shoulders from 6 feet to 4 feet. And then we'll have 4-foot shoulders through the project limits, north and south of the project limits, conforming to existing at the end of the project limits.
Thank you, Karen. So remind us again, what are the current shoulder widths
Oh,
existing?
yeah,
They're essentially zero.
Essentially zero.
There may be inches to maybe a foot maximum, but there's essentially none.
Okay.
So
the
I,
bridge will have, yeah,
I
go
just,
ahead, Chris.
I've said many times, you talk about pedestrian safety, but you didn't, think about making sure that those pedestrians that, you're trying to improve this bridge for get to where they need to go safely. So I just hope that y'all do continue to look at that and maybe make that a separate project. It is, since it is in your purview, I'm sure it's Highway 1. Maybe y'all could do that at another time in the future, but I think that's really important to make something like that happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Carice. It's a great comment. And something we don't talk about a lot, I think, is the overall vision for Mendocino 1. And that's in alignment with the local coastal plan. And we publish it in our transportation route concept report. So essentially, the vision is to maintain the rural nature of the road and to provide 4-foot shoulders on highways and 6-foot shoulders on bridges. So anytime we come in and we have an area where we're doing a project, and if we can increase shoulder widths, provide improved access for pedestrians and cyclists, we would do that. We would try to do that. If it's conducive and it's possible to do that. So as we go further south, and anytime we have a project, we would like to get that cross section, that 4-foot shoulder and 12-foot lane, because we know it's safer for all users and accessible for all users. So definitely that's the long-term vision for Highway 1. Thank you so much, Carice. So I believe we are trying to get to people who have not yet had a chance to speak. So I see Stephanie, you had your hand up, and then Jane, you had your hand up. So Stephanie, please.
Thank you. One observation and one question. The project descriptions that have circulated, including the one that was before the Coastal Commission, although the ambiguity in it was never resolved, is apparently the footprint for the project extends considerably south of the Lansing Street junction, certainly to the east. And it appeared on the various graphics included in the package to the Coastal Commission that it included the west side too. So it's a little confusing as to why the improvements that have been requested by those who live in the community have not been able to be accommodated. That's the comment. The question is, several times you have indicated that the staging areas are going to be within the Caltrans right-of-way. The Caltrans right-of-way, at least on the east side, is very wide, since in the late 60s, Caltrans acquired significant private property for purposes of installing a freeway along that stretch of Highway 1. In addition, Caltrans has right-of-way on the west side of the highway for the entire length of the project. And the question is, where within the Caltrans rights-of-way will the staging take place? Obviously, the contractor will have something to say about that, but Caltrans, as the applicant and owner of the property, has the final responsibility for assuring that these things are done consistent both with the permit and with the other constraints pursuant to which Caltrans operates. So where is the staging going to occur?
Thank you, Stephanie. Karen, maybe are there some products that people can refer to that are showing the staging areas or potential staging areas and plans that have been produced or would be produced?
Yeah, we could share that information, and the areas where I was expecting the staging and is one of the first orders of work will be to perform the cut, excavating that side slope for the widened roadway, shifting the center line to the east. And in that space is where we are expecting the construction staging to go. So there would be a temporary access road for a temporary trestle and the false work for the widening, the bridge widening. We weren't expecting any, other areas other than, where we have graded the graded sites. And then,
So on either end of the bridge, will the staging, for example, take place on the north end of the bridge or the south end of the bridge? And to the west of the highway or to the east of the highway?
so I would expect on the east side, both north and south, probably primarily on the north side, but north and south, I would expect them to use all the space that's available. They would also, I would expect to have materials or equipment temporarily at least parked in the pullout that's on the southwest side of the bridge, and any space that's available, I would expect to have equipment parked during construction.
All right, and to the north,
Mhm.
my recollection is near 500D, there was at some point a staging area proposed, but again, it was a rather ambiguous designation. What about at that end?
Yeah, so keep in mind, so we have two real staging operations. The first stage is to widen the bridge, so the work would be on the east side of the road. We will have the temporary barrier essentially along the center line across the bridge. And so behind that temporary barrier is where we would expect to have equipment staged and the contractor working on that side.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Behind being on the west side or the east side?
So for the stage one, I would say on the east side of the bridge, the equipment would be parked and materials would be parked on the east side. Traffic would be on the west, on the southbound lane. So we would have reversing traffic control, traffic using the southbound lane, the contractor using the northbound lane, and the shoulders and the space on the east side of the highway. During stage two, the traffic would be shifted to the new widened section of the bridge to the east, and the contractor then would be working on the west side of the bridge to replace the existing barrier rail with the new barrier rail and the pedestrian barrier rail. So when the contractor is on the west side of the road, I would expect the contractor to be staging on the west side in the pullout, between Lansing Road and Road 500D.
And just one final question. I'm sorry. So there will not be any equipment parking, material storage, or other staging activities on the west side of the highway, just north of Lansing. Is that correct?
So that pull-out area, that nice like parking area, because we even parked there and did our site review at that area. So the contractor could use that. Construction's I'm going to defer to them again. But if there's they may have to park their equipment, off of the road. We don't want it to be a safety hazard for traffic. So there's some restrictions put on the contractor to make sure that the area is cleared for traffic and cyclists and pedestrians and people. So we have to make sure there's a clear space through the construction site.
Thank you,
Is
Karen.
that property, I'm sorry, is that property within the Caltrans right of way?
Yeah, right at the end of the bridge, between the end of the bridge and Lansing, that gravel pullout in between the guardrail. Is that where you're thinking?
Yes.
Yeah, that's within Caltrans right of way.
All right, and you've done geotechnical testing to see what weight of equipment it's going to be able to hold? And I'm fairly certain you haven't, but I would urge you and your contractor to take that into account. We're somewhat familiar with the geologic condition of that area and want to make sure your contractors, your equipment, and anyone nearby will be safe. Thanks.
Thank you for the geotechnical recommendation. Jeff, do you have any other comments about the staging?
It'll be a little bit to the discretion of the contractor. You know, we have areas that are defined as environmentally sensitive areas, which will obviously be off limits, but anything else that's within the state right away, within the project limits, that's available safely for the contractor to use without compromising the safe passage of the public is pretty much a feasible staging area. So, you know, this is a very compact project. We've made concessions to try to address concerns of the community and not use the sites that were potentially identified in the town. And so, you know, we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner a little bit. And so we're trying to operate on the tightest footprint that we can to reduce impacts. And so, you know, we need a little bit of latitude to operate within our right of way to be able to advance the improvements. And we feel we can do that safely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So the next person who hasn't had a chance to comment yet, thank you, Stephanie, is I see Jane. So Jane, your hand's up, and if you're able to take yourself off mute, please feel free to share any questions or concerns.
I've never done this, so I have no idea if you can hear me.
We hear you just fine, Jane.
Okay, I do photography, and I go down the west side or the east side of the bridge to walk down a path that abalone divers use to go then under the bridge and take photographs of the little succulent plants that grow in the rocks there and pictures along the beach. And then I walk around the beach and come up the other side behind the bathrooms over there. Will that be closed off? I suppose I could always go down by the bathrooms, behind the bathrooms.
Karen or Jeff, could you speak to that if you understand what Jane's referring to?
I'm not sure I understood exactly where Jane is referring to, but what I think I heard her say is she's referring to the path that advances underneath the bridge on the south side of the river canyon there. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
And so it's my understanding that path is there. Obviously, we will have construction going on in that area. I don't think there's any intention to close the path. You know, we will have to maybe temporarily close the path for pedestrian safety based on certain activities that are being performed when the bridge work is being constructed and some of the other drainage improvements potentially. But I don't think there's any long-term closure of the path planned per se.
Thank you. I've almost lost my life on that bridge walking across, so I'm happy about the widening of the walking path. Bye.
Thank you, Jane. And I'm glad that question got answered. Was it interesting when we were on site looking at that bridge, we noticed that there were old climbing fasteners on that pier of the bridge. So I think people use the trail, or they used to at some point, and they were practicing rock climbing. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, Walter and Gail, but looks like the half of the climbing gear has been removed. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance yet? Do you have any questions or concerns on the Jack Peters project? And checking the time, Manny, I believe we are, how long are we going here?
6:30.
6:30. So we do have a few more minutes. Cycling back through, since there's no other hands up, I believe Norbert, you had the first question, and then Anne Marie was second. So let's go back to Norbert. Any other questions for us, please? Oh, and Norbert, I think you're on mute.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, hear you now,
Hey,
Norbert.
there we go. Thank you to all the Caltrans staff for participating in this. Meetings like this tend to raise more questions, so I've got a couple, and I will submit these in writing as well. The first one is, would Caltrans staff please post all of the relevant documents on the Jack Peters Bridge website so the folks in the community can actually see them? Number two, it struck me in reviewing this just as we approach this meeting that I have not seen any geotechnical analysis of the maximum G loading of the piers for the bridge that are proposed. And in light of evolving seismic analysis on this part of the coast, I think it would be very useful for Caltrans to post what in fact are the design parameters for seismic acceleration here, including but not limited to the San Andreas fault zone. Number three, has a bed and bank 1602 Fish and Game Code analysis been done? And is in fact any work proposed to be done that is subject to section 1602? And if yes, has Caltrans obtained an approval under 1602 of the Fish and Game Code? Fourthly, I see a disjunctive. The project schedule has now been described as including work in the fall and into the winter. But as all of us know, the permit from the Coastal Commission limits the work to June through October. Has Caltrans submitted an application to the Coastal Commission to amend or revise the coastal permit? And if not, does Caltrans plan to do so? And then just very quickly, has a habitat mitigation parcel agreement plan that satisfies condition 5 been submitted? Special condition 7, has the hydroacoustic monitoring plan been prepared and submitted? Special condition 8, has the stormwater pollution prevention plan been prepared and submitted? Special condition 11, has the construction waste debris dispersal plan or disposal plan been submitted? Condition 12, what other permits have been obtained from the state and federal agencies that apply here, including with regard to, as the lady said, the fisheries that may be under federal control? And then finally, does Caltrans have a legal right to use all property, including the property that the contractor would use to dispose material at a currently undisclosed site? Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Norbert. I think with our given time left, we'll hear those comments, and we are developing a frequently asked questions document, and some of those that might go in there would get answered. Thank you for all the questions tonight. We look forward to posting that. And I think at this time, Manny, anything else we need to say in closing? Just really appreciate people attending and look forward to future engagement on this project.
Great.
Anything else, Manny?
Yeah, again,
Excuse me, you said that you would call on me.
Anne Marie, I'm so sorry. We're just out of time. If we could close the meeting.
I
and
don't
you
think
and I
that's
can,
fair, since you said that you would call on me, and now you're not gonna call on me. I mean,
Anne
is
Marie,
it
you and I
gonna
could
be
stay here,
life or
and
death if we have 5 more minutes?
Anne Marie, you and I can stay and talk here. We'll close the meeting for everybody else, and we'll make sure that we hear what you're having to say
I don't
here.
agree with that, because this video will be online, and you need to give the public the right to say what they want to say. I think it's very undemocratic.
Thank you, Anne
We
Marie.
have COVID, we can't talk to you in person, and this is not a way to do business. I have 3 questions, and it takes 5 minutes.
We'll hear
And
them.
you're not going to answer them like you didn't answer Norbert's question, but I would like to, speak.
Definitely, you'll get to speak. We do need to close this call out. People do have to go. We want to honor everyone's time. Anne Marie,
I would like to stay on the call if I can, please.
Sure, we'll give you 5 minutes. Norbert and Anne Marie can stay.
No,
And
I'm sorry. I meant when Anne Marie asks her questions, I'd like to be on the call.
you bet. We'll
Thank
stay
you.
right now, and then
As would I. Thank you.
oh, you bet. Okay. And everyone else would like to say goodnight. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your participation, and yeah, look forward to working with you into the future.
And
Thank you.
again, we will post tonight's meeting online to our Caltrans social media. Also, if you have other questions, email Jack Peters Creek Bridge at dot.ca.gov. We also on the Caltrans webpage for Jack Peters Creek Bridge. That's where you can find more information on this project.